O'clock plus 1 minute, reconvene. 1 o'clock. Turn that camera off, Jim. All right, come on up, Oz.
Okay.
The subject for the audience is the
Edmund
Wells
purchase.
By ODF.
Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So, for the record, I'm Craig Bosser. I'm District Wildlife Biologist for Lake County Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're here today. We've got I gave Denise a couple of handouts for you. We have an opportunity to purchase 560 acres in the north end of the Summer Lake Basin that would fit in with the management of our Summer Lake Wildlife Area. It's called the Edmund Well Wildlife Sanctuary at the moment. It's owned by the Edmonds Family Trust. Don Edmonds developed the property from probably the late 90s through the middle of 2000, and upon Don's passing, his wife has been using the property for outdoor education opportunities and youth opportunities and things like that.
And a lot of that is kids from schools in Bend and other.
Yeah, primarily Central Oregon schools. Yeah, so at this point, Carol would like to sell the property, and she approached us of whether or not we'd be interested. Marty St. Louis is with me today, and Chip Dale, our supervisor out of Bend. And Marty was instrumental in working with Don and Carol on development of the wetland complexes out here, and over the years, the department put some money into the effort, but it was primarily a private effort on their part. We would be using the last of the Ruby pipeline mitigation money to purchase this property. The department received, and through the mitigation process of Ruby pipeline, the department received $2 million for the purchase of property to maintain or enhance basically hunting and fishing access, wildlife habitat in the state of Oregon. We used a portion of that money to purchase 10,000 acres on the Deschutes River in Wasco County, and the remainder of the money would go towards the purchase of these parcels of the Edmonds property. How we're going to manage the property is still, we're not real clear on, we don't have a set plan yet. Obviously, hunting and fishing are going to be part of it. That's what we do. That's what the department does, is manage public access for recreational hunting and fishing opportunity. That would stay that way. That would probably, because of the small size of the parcel, Summer Lake Wildlife Area, if you're familiar with it, we hunt that. It's basically open from shooting hours to shooting hours 7 days a week. It's a huge area, 12,000 huntable acres, 18,000 total acres. This is a small section. We'll probably have to do some type of limited entry scenario. People apply for an access permit. We haven't got all the details of that worked out. We would also try to maintain some type of outdoor education facility. There's 2 houses on the property. One of them is set up as a dorm room that Carol has been using for the kids. We'd like to maintain that, potentially, if somebody needed a weekend business meeting type facility, they could schedule the lodge for that. So we haven't got all the details of that worked out. We're talking with our IME folks, but it would certainly be maintained as some type of benefit to public community. When we get all this kind of figured out, how we would do the management, we'd actually do probably an addendum to the Summer Lake Wildlife Area Management Plan that we developed just for the Edmonds tract, and that'd go through a public process of how we propose to run it, what public use would be, what its benefits would be, and things like that. So, generally, in a nutshell, that's what we're proposing. We've got a willing seller. We we are willing buyers, we have the funding, and so we're before the commissioners today to let you know what we're up to.
Well, I appreciate it, Foz, and reading the lead-in, from us, and you probably gave this to Denise, that there's no decision that's being made by the board on this matter, it's just an opportunity for you to update us on what's going on, so I appreciate that. I might have missed it because I was trying to read this letter that you gave us here while you were talking, but when you go back to the Ruby mitigation money, what was going through my mind was mitigation opportunities with this new tract of land. So will we see that as an opportunity for something that needs to be done, or an opportunity to do something someplace else that ODF and W can use this to mitigate some impacts?
I doubt that that's gonna be the case, and I'm gonna get Chip up here.
Okay.
He knows a little bit more about mitigation.
Well, it just seems like, even though it's a smaller tract of land, it just seems like another one of those opportunities that was not necessarily available before.
Chair Shawn, for the record, I'm Chip Dale, Watershed Manager for Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife out of the Bend office. When we set up the mitigation funds out of the Ruby pipeline, there were two types of mitigation funds that came out. One was to go out and do habitat restoration activities associated with the impacts, and actually enhancements, because Ruby actually was a pretty good outfit to work with, and the funds were available to do quite a bit of work. But in addition, as we saw the pipeline coming down the pipeline, and we started seeing lots of wind farm proposals and lots of solar farm proposals and whatnot, some of us at the department started looking at one of the things coming down into the future is many of those developments which will occur on public lands will probably be taking those lands out of public hunting opportunity. Solar farms and guns are not particularly compatible with each other, nor typically are wind farms. So what we saw as an opportunity, while the mitigation for the physical impacts associated with the Ruby pipeline was pretty much being taken care of with the habitat projects that were undertaken, the part of the opportunity we saw was to buffet some of that development that was coming down the pike on the public lands. So this was really an acquisition primarily for the interest of providing both for some habitat values associated with similar to those laws, but also a big part was to get some recreational access in the form of hunting and fishing.
And safeguarding Atlantic Species Habitat is a form of mitigation.
Yes.
That, whether it turns in, it wouldn't turn necessarily into a mitigation bank for future.
Well, that was my
Yeah,
question.
it's not gonna, because the management of this parcel of land is gonna be funded through Marty's PR budget for the entire wildlife area, it's gonna be an additional, basically an additional line item in his budget management of the Edmonds tract. And that's federal aid money, that's dedicated money for management of wildlife habitat in this case. We wouldn't use it as a mitigation bank for future projects.
Okay.
Okay, this is gonna be part of the Summer Lake Wildlife Area.
And the question that Lake County Commissioners always ask is the tax base. And that's going to be incorporated with the Summer Lake payment of taxes.
These additional acres would fall into the tax base, so the state of Oregon, Department of Fish and Wildlife pays payment on other taxes, at basically the Department deferral rate, and so we would pick up the tax burden at the Department deferral rate for these projects.
So has a decision already been made to purchase it?
No, it's not a permanent decision. It's a proposal because we have an outstanding balance of those Ruby pipeline funds. And so what the process we go through at this point in time, we're really doing our due diligence. And the reason we're here is we don't want any surprises. I've had some bad experiences. People seem to be surprised with land acquisition. So really, we're here very early in the process. There's a whole bunch of steps that we still would need to go through before anything was finalized. And truly, the true final point is a public decision process made by our commission in a public commission. So, but before we got anywhere near that, we wanted you all to know, the county to know that we were exploring this opportunity.
Foz knows this straightforward, it's tough for me when we take private lands and put them into government ownership, and that's just sort of been my stance for many years. I'm not against good sanctuaries and that type of thing. Also said, does this property now, does it support any cattle? Does it have any agriculture? Does it have any hay and habit going on it?
You want to slide a chair up here, Marty, because you're getting into the
This
details
is
of
why
how
we
it's
have the
managed
detail
now.
It's looking, there's no seat.
You can sit up here, Marty.
It's like a hot one. Well, thank you, Chair Shallen, for the record. My name is Marty St. Louis, the manager of Summer Lake Wildlife Area.
And just for the, we had to set by order of our positions, that we just recently, this morning, elected Commissioner Kestner as our chair for this year. I'm the vice chair this year, and it was.
I'm nobody.
Commissioner Winter, so
Please
it's
accept
kind
my
of odd.
apology, Chair Kessler.
But position
You
is
wanna
position
trade?
1, position 2, position 3.
Yeah,
That is separate from the chair.
yeah,
Thank you.
just for clarification.
Sure. To answer your question, Brad, currently, or for a long number of years, there's been no active agricultural operations on the Edmonds Love property. They acquired it, it had been part of another ranch prior to that time, and it did have livestock on it. There aren't really any hayable lands out there. It would have been just open range and grazing areas that way, associated with some of the older artesian wells that were out there. Probably, I believe those were drilled in the early 1900s, the Hafer, the Hale well. And so there was some riparian vegetation there that was grazed. But when Edmonds acquired it, they started the development, and they wanted to have it kind of open there just to see what was going to happen before there would be any.
You can tell by their passion, and especially if you go to Google Earth and see the reservoir that's been, or the pond, I guess you would call it.
Sure.
Hopefully, if you acquire it, maybe you would use cattle as a tool to manage it. I mean, I'm very pro that way. I think they're a good tool, and I don't know how your guys' view on that is, but sometimes that's not a bad tool to use, is cattle.
Yeah, it's a very major tool right now in the existing Summer Lake Wildlife Area. I work with 3 separate permittees that are all adjoining landowners, and it's a pretty large operation on the wildlife area. The wildlife area would be a lot different than the application here, just because of size. We've got a lot of pastures or areas that we graze. We utilize the livestock to manage wildlife habitat, not really, kind of like to take grazing out of it. It's just like, it's a tool that we use for vegetation management, but it happens to fit hand in glove with the adjoining landowners. But we've got large tracts on the wildlife area that are more suitable for that, whereas here it might be just some kind of periodic prescriptions of livestock to be able to use them that way.
It has to go with the land and.
It wouldn't be an annual permit.
Right.
You're gonna take X number of AUMs off, you know.
Be part of your management.
But when the vegetation starts to lodge and the nesting cover starts to get a little rank, you can run some cows in there and clean it up in a season, and then, you know, it might be 4, 5, 6 years before you're back with cattle.
Water rights and existing water rights, you acquire those at the same time, and is there water rights that come off that to other people, and have you been working on that part of it, because that can be one of the most volatile things, as we all have lived, maybe not all of us, but I've lived through the Friends of Summer Lake saga and so on. I'm sure that you probably already talked to some water right issues.
Yes, as it was mentioned before, this is really preliminary. I mean, this is just our first steps. I mean, there's been no direct communication between our realty section and Carol Edmonds, the current owner right now, to really even initiate the process. You know, Carol and I have talked verbally, and we've been working together that way. I pulled together a lot of that information into a proposal that went into our wildlife division and to the upper levels and stuff, and they gave us some modeling. So all this is really preliminary. But yes, to answer your question, I've looked into the water rights, and I've got copies from Carol on that. I worked with Dawn and Carol in perfecting some of those water rights. They all have water rights certificates. And then there is some other, like you mentioned, kind of some crossover or connecting issues with water. This is kind of a tricky situation, but from what I know of it just initially, again, we haven't really looked into it into great detail, but it's water that's originating off of a well on BLM property, but the certificate is held on an adjoining private piece outside of the wildlife area, but the water is conveyed through the wildlife area, well, Edmonds Well wildlife area. And so the water rights are there in place, you know, and basically you honor that water rights, you know, pertinent to the land.
Yeah, it should be all in the water right prescription or whatever.
Correct.
If somebody's, I'm sorry, I have a cold, so I'm not talking to Trevor. So if somebody's filed, you would honor the rights they have of any surplus or runoff water and all that, is what you're saying, basically.
Sure, and I think it's gone beyond the filing stage to where, you know, they are actual water rights certificates, you know, so that they've been through the process,
So, yeah.
almost to the goal line, save adjudication, which hasn't happened in that part of Lake County yet.
Right.
Or any part.
Are they senior water rights or junior?
I don't know if there would be, there's no determination yet since there is no adjudication, but they would have priority dates, and I don't, since they are not drawing on a water course or a water body, these are all groundwater.
So
Wells.
even though this is all preliminary, have you had any discussions with Brian Mayer, our state water master here in Lake County, on this? Just to get some clarification, because he's pretty up on that.
Yeah, over the years, you know, I've worked with him and Dawn together on
Yeah.
this, you know, with the water rights. And I really didn't have any specific question to ask him at this time.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it almost stands by itself when you've got a certificate. And unless you were to change the location of that water or to change the use of that water, then you would re-engage, you know, in the public process and water resources. But if you were utilizing it with what the original permit and the certificate said, I think it just moves across with the change in ownership.
And I know you said you're writing the preliminary part of this, which preliminary means you've been working on it quite a while, actually. It's just getting through all our government process, but, and I mentioned this to Foz here a month ago or whatever, the local buy-in, the adjacent landowners, the community, that's, to me, is pretty important. You know, if I was to have 2 or 3 landowners come in and say, I strongly oppose this, it would sort of set it up for failure. So as you're working forward to get the ownership of the community and the adjacent landowners, I think it's pretty darn important, and you probably already working on that.
Yeah, that was kind of some of the initial steps in the application process. There were sections in there about contacting adjacent and adjoining landowners. I've contacted several of them on the private side of things, bordering on the north border of the property is Steve Scott, the Lake in the Dunes shooting preserve and fishing establishment. It's up off the north part of the map on that. We've talked with Sheffields, both Jalen and Dixie, and they're not adjacent to the property. They're a little bit further north on the other side of Steve Scott's, but they're concerned about, you know, public use and what may take place out there. Another landowner, an adjacent landowner, who bought property from the Edmonds probably in the early 70s, Vern Eastburn. When I talked to him, I think he bought it mainly as an investment purpose, and it's not really his intention to develop. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but, you know, he was, you know, okay with ODFW buying that, and then I think I even posed the question, well, you know, how about your piece there, since it was formerly attached? Would you be maybe interested in working that way? And he indicated at that time, possibly he needed to contact his family. Other big landowners off the lower left on this map, seeing down here, is the,
On the left.
Right.
on the left. But I went to a real right leaner, it's George Carlin's old ranch.
That's true, and I gotta
Easy.
interrupt this and make
Easy.
a comment. Commissioner Winters just a minute ago said something about his cold, which was keeping him from talking as much. He's got a cold, he can't talk as well, but he is talking.
I couldn't talk up.
Of course, the Carlin Ranch, it was recently acquired by Dr. Martin Fernald from up in Summer Lake, and I had conversations with him, and he was very, very favorable with ODF&W acquiring it. And a full 65% of the remaining perimeter or boundary is the Bureau of Land Management. And kind of to step back in time a little bit, when I was working with Don and Carol in the development of this, BLM was also very active in that area. Walt DeVores worked closely with them, and a habitat management plan was developed mainly by Walt taking the lead on that brought in ODF&W, the Summer Lake Wildlife Area, and adjoining BLM lands in the northeast part of the basin, as well as the Edmonds property, into a habitat management plan. I've been talking with Todd Forbes with the BLM about, you know, where are we on this HMP? For a while there, we were updating it periodically every 5 years, and he said, well, it's sort of out of vogue now, and resource management planning effort, but it kind of wraps into the major planning efforts. And of course, the BLM is supportive of this sort of activity because it kind of falls right into place to the way it was with that HMP or that habitat management plan. So yeah, you know, we've kind of started the process, and we will re-engage all those same people and such as we move down the road, and before we would come up at a later date for kind of the final end product. As I mentioned, we haven't even started, we as an agency, our realty section, hasn't even started talking to Carol. It's just mainly been me talking with her. Another part of history there, I joined them, I became a member of the board for the kids sanctuary and have been to date. And so it was through that process at one of the board meetings, Carol was talking about cash flow and the trust. And the trust was mainly set up before Dawn passed away as kind of Carol's retirement. And so she was saying, well, funds are starting to dwindle, and, you know, we may have to start looking at, you know, partitioning off pieces of this trust property to continue funding the trust. And, you know, unless we can find a suitable buyer. And she asked me about that, and I got to thinking, especially with Ruby Pipeline, so I proposed the question to her, you know, what do you think about ODF&W? And she just responded, this is great, you know, kind of falls in line with what we have for our visions in perpetuity for the property.
So, as I continue to talk, so you have the mitigation dollars to purchase this. So then you have operational dollars, you're taking on 600 or 500 some odd acres, not 640. Two structures, lots of ponds. Being a hunter and seeing my cost of my license go up as I just purchased my sports pack, or my wife did for Christmas, and $8 per application, and you guys create about $2 million just on application fees by my numbers going through the book. What other increases are us consumers going to have to come up with to pay for the operations?
I guess that's why I'm here. Answer some of those big picture questions. Well, first off, Marty's budget is basically driven by Pittman-Robertson dollars, and those are federal dollars that are matched back to licensed dollars at a ratio of 3 federal dollars to $1. The Pittman-Robertson dollars, because of the grace of who the president is, I think, has grown substantially in the last 8 years, 7 years, due to ammunition sales. So those excise taxes on sporting goods also include excise taxes on guns and ammunition. So we've had a surfeit of those dollars and opportunities to be using those dollars. So, and we anticipate that will continue for a little while. And so basically our federal funding partners, who would be basically funding the operation along with 1/4 of the ODFW dollars, will still be at the table. I have to tell you, Summer Lake is truly the flagship wildlife area in the state. And if you haven't been out there recently, Marty spent a lot of work and effort in the last 5 years really renovating a lot of those wetlands. But to get there, he had to be able to go back and do a lot of the infrastructure work, because much of the infrastructure was there with the head gates and the dikes and everything, and the roads and whatnot, dated back to what, the 40s, some of them, very, very old. He did that with partnerships with the Ducks Unlimited and other entities that went in on it with us, and really achieved quite a great outcome. I mean, if you haven't gone up on Winter Rim and taken a look, it's pretty cool to see how much more open water there is. So we're very aware of how much effort it's going to take to go through that. But we've got ourselves geared up such that we're prepared to be doing it. We've kind of turned that corner now with the big hurdles we got through at Summer Lake, and we're pretty much set up for that. You're asking about license dollars. What happened with the last legislative session, for those of you that buy hunting and fishing licenses, is rather than going for this huge jump in a license cost, which would have been a fairly significant amount of money, like 30% or so, the legislature agreed that the license fee increases would be ramped up over a 6-year period at a certain percentage each biennium. So rather than us going forward, what typically we have done is raised substantial amounts of costs for those license dollars because they had to carry us for 6 years. Now we're ramping it up very slowly. The goal of the agency, I think you're going to find, will be that we're finding and looking for other alternatives for funding, other opportunities that we're hoping we don't necessarily have to do the 3rd stage of that ramping, so that we can slow down on those fee increases. So in answer to the question about the fee increases and the cost, it's kind of twofold. One is, much of the dollars that are available for Marty to do the operation come from more from the federal end of the excise taxes, which we have available to us. The other answer is more to the case that I hear you're concerned about the license dollar cost. I got the same problem, I buy a license every year. But the agency really has taken to heart, and there is currently a basically a blue ribbon committee working on a legislative appointment to be looking at strategies on how we fund the agency into the future, because sticker shock has been an ongoing problem for our agency. It's an issue.
Yeah, I didn't want to go down the path of the licenses and everything too far, but
Yeah.
For me, it's starting price, especially starting out families out and being able to carry on the heritage that I love so much. And that's my concern, is for not only our youth, but our elderly to continue to do that, so that's a concern. My question really should have been, how much is this going to increase your budget to be able to take on this 500 and so many acres? And he did answer most of that by 3-to-1 match, so that's pretty darn good. You can leverage $3 for every one in federal dollars, so it shouldn't increase too much on the state dollars.
Yeah, at this point in time, we really haven't sat down and looked at it hard, on to what would be a request from my end annually to put in our request to the Wildlife Division, and the Wildlife Division then collectively allocates monies out to us to be matched, the license dollars to be matched with the federal aid funds. And as Chip mentioned, the federal aid funds, it's right now there's a pot of money that's too big. We can't even fully
Well,
utilize
but
it.
it sounds like with the Chip said there, the good work you've done, you've got most everything caught up over here on this, because it's gonna be a gap between the two. You got this caught up, so you're going to have those dollars built on this.
That's exactly what happened. It allowed, the work that we've done this past 7 or 8 years has allowed us to become much more efficient. There's much less reliance on annual maintenance that it was getting to be a very large burden prior to us undertaking this big development. So yeah, there could be a reallocation of effort or shifting money around.
So Marty, and I've noticed, I've been by there many times and on the refuge, a few times, but not recently. But I know you've made a lot of improvements for the waterfowl, the waters, the roads, the dikes, all of those things. But have you had adequate money, and is there any opportunity? I want to ask a question about Land and Water Conservation Fund too, but as it relates, because this is the showcase in the state, to the physical structures there, because it seems like you probably haven't been funded enough to do some of the things you like to do there beyond the wildlife part of it.
More of a.
The buildings.
The buildings.
Facilities.
Yeah,
Headquarters.
but I'm a wildlife field guy by heart.
He's biologist, not a carpenter.
So whether or not his wife's house is painted, is kind of.
Or the neighbors.
We're getting to it. But yeah,
So funding's not a problem, it's just a priority type thing, is that true?
timing and priority.
Because I quite honestly, I have a lot of people that, they love the refuge family even that comes from the west side and up in the Portland area, and they've asked me, about that, and I never felt compelled, but since we're on this discussion of having adequate funding, I just thought I'd ask.
Well, actually, we appreciate that feedback. Most people that come through there, the hunters and stuff, all they worry about is whether they got the right license tag and they want to get out the door. So actually, that feedback, I appreciate that.
Yeah, a lot of people have commented on it.
Yeah. And in Marty's defense, the priority that we put on him was to get this infrastructure done so he could actually manage the area. But you bring up a good point. We have added some buildings, have put some new sheds, equipment sheds and stuff out there.
And they look nice.
And you still need that sign on the highway replaced.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, actually.
I do have another question. Over here, on the far end. Access, I haven't researched, is it BLM road, does it go county to BLM? What's the access? Are we gonna see an impact if it's county road on our use of our county road, or is it all BLM access? I have to get off Carlin Way. I've never been to this site. Do you know?
Yes, it would all be county road.
County road?
Up to where it takes off from Sheffield Lane.
Okay.
And then that stretch there, I'm not sure of that access or easements on that, but it's a short distance off of Sheffield Lane. But prior to that time, once you come off of Highway 31, you're all on county roads.
I appreciate you offer a cost share.
You said you'll match 3 to 1. I don't think there'd be significant impact, but anytime that there's gonna be something changing, creates more recreation, that might mean off the paved side that we might have to run a grader and a time or 2 extra or something like that. So I have researched that part, this when it came to me.
And the wet season road traffic.
Yeah.
So
Just an awareness.
if you don't mind, just so I don't forget, I did want to ask about the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund. It just recently looks like, they have a $900 million, it's not appropriations, but allowance, and they never funded that. But do you folks here ever get access to any of that? It's not, it's gonna be funded around $450 million this year nationally.
I've never heard of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've
Okay.
never heard of it.
That concept just came up today on an email that I got from headquarters talking about the land and water conservation and with the idea of, for those of us that are entertaining acquisitions.
Well, and that's primarily what it's for, and get, you know, part of that, and it kind of goes back to Commissioner Winter's question, is heretofore, they haven't had the funding that they requested, but they continue to make acquisitions, but they don't have any maintenance money, you know, to keep the things going.
So the Land and Water Conservation Fund, at least where I've seen it applied, has been, I've seen actually USDA come and apply for it through the Forest Service on, Deschutes Forest applied for some. They've been such scattered dollars over the period that there hasn't been a steady stream. And you're right, there's no follow-through dollars, so there are ones where they're acquisitions. We historically have really not been party to that. And if I'm not mistaken, actually, there was some of those funds were made available to nonprofits. I think there was some of that occurred and was looked at more in order to set specific habitats and things like that into hands. I'll be very honest with you, you know, the state is very careful about acquiring property these days. We're sensitive to the issue about taking private lands and turning them into public lands. We've only done so where we've had a very strong public sentiment and support for doing so. So it's not like we're always out looking to buy a bunch of land, you know, where we've had opportunities arise, but we have been given notice about that. I think where you probably see us looking for stuff like that would be where there's in holdings and stuff, just to consolidate stuff. That would probably be the more applicable stuff, because we also are very careful about, we don't overextend ourselves. The questions about maintenance are real. So that, you know, it's not like we really wanted to go out and acquire a piece of property where Marty's crew would have to drive 45 minutes to go deal with it. The same thing with the Deschutes property is pretty close to our Lower Deschutes Wildlife Management Area. One other piece we tried to acquire at Riverside was already being worked on by our Ontario crew, we already managed property there. So I appreciate that input on that. We'll probably be looking at it more, particularly if they start running into problems on finding ways to spend the money, but.
I'll intervene a little bit on the kids. I'm 100% behind it. On preserving wetlands, because we've lost one worst percentage across the United States. I mean, I'm surprised how hard it has. So I support that concept. Get down to the education and hunting. The hunter population, the percentage of the population is always dwindling in conjunction with the growing population. And most of your revenue come from hunting license. So there's a challenge to keep promoting hunting and recreational hunting. If you have education out there for kids, how are you going to mesh the two together so that those young kids would appreciate hunting?
Can I dive in here for a second? Just real quick, Ken, the things that I see this lending itself because of that facility there, not necessarily with kids, but this would be a great facility for our Becoming an Outdoor Woman program. You know, we have an active program where we take women that are interested in hunting and fishing in the outdoors and do clinics and workshops and teach them how to throw a fly, teach them how to shoot a shotgun and stuff like that. So this facility, we're great for that. On the kids thing, you know, I've been teaching hunter safety classes for 32 years. I've been real active with Oregon Hunters Association with their youth day. We have potential for this property to work in conjunction with OHA for a youth day. It's been a great youth day spot. It's a tough spot because you gotta travel, okay, but it'd be a great spot for the kids that showed up. So there's just two, and there's, I don't know what.
Mentor program,
I,
great place to.
I had taken the opportunity to contact our INE section and headquarters and ask basically the same question, you know, where are the potentials here for this facility, you know, as I explained it to them. And they said one of the key things they thought too would be it would be an ideal site for a trainer type deal, be it hunter education instructors, angler education instructors, bow hunting, anything like that then would, you know, kind of advance the program as they take it further. They did say, and Boz mentioned too, the shortcomings for having like a youth waterfowl hunting training or something. It's a little difficult just because we're so remote right there in Summer Lake. But it would have, you know, some applications that way, and certainly with the local Oregon Hunters Association and their youth day. I've also been in contact with Jeff Samples with COIC, and we just kind of, he showed up one day into the office, I think, probably using our facilities as a rest area. The facilities are getting pretty renowned that way
Yeah,
for this.
I've been forgetting that. I've been going up. You need to stop there and see it.
But there's a growing populace of Lakeview that is discovering it.
Yes.
But anyways, Jeff was in there, and, you know, we just kind of threw out a few ideas. I said, this is very, very preliminary, but, you know, as it progresses, there may be some opportunities there for some sort of partnerships for education, youth involvement that way.
I'm very favorable of that, looking at the next generation here, how we're going to promote
You know,
conservation and utilization.
Chair Kessler, it's interesting, there was an article that came out, it was a press release, and these guys can correct me if it was a specific license, but they've seen significant growth in the sales of, I think it's hunting license to women in the state of Oregon. That's been one of the bumps. Certainly fishing license. Yeah. So there are some big statewide efforts that are going on, and this would be basically facilitating one of those statewide efforts that are out ahead.
This piece of property has great opportunity, not only the hunting, but has the fishing also. It's sort of a complete package in one aspect as far as fish and wildlife goes. Sort of a neighbor is Desert Springs hatchery. You guys don't intend on setting up a hatchery or anything there, that you'd be in competition with the private sector or anything like that?
On a trophy, are you going to utilize?
That's a Desert Springs fish, by the
Yeah.
way.
I think you'll find the state of Oregon has about all the hatcheries it wants to fund.
Well,
I just wanted to protect the private sector. I knew where you guys were at, but I asked the question.
well, before we close, I had one other question. Tongue in cheek. I'll say that ahead of time. So in our part of the world, our area code's 541. And I'm wondering what the chances are of getting some administrative fees, since I'm not an avid hunter, but I became more educated simply because my phone number is 947-6000.
Are you making those calls?
For the last going on 10 years,
That's
I
right.
receive about 50 calls a year on questions to do with licenses and kids
Yes.
and all of those things. So I've educated myself a little bit more, and then at the end, I tell them, you need to call 503.
Well, I share your pain, because you know what happened is in one of the documents,
Commissioner questions.
basically, they said the phone number to call for information was the DEND office, statewide. For the longest period of time, I was getting calls from Central Point and LaGrande and Portland, everywhere else, because Ben seemed to be the number you called to get that information. And we had the darndest time getting it changed.
Yeah.
It was because of a phone book error. Or no, it was a Google area. People would Google the phone, Google ODFW, and it came up with the Bend office number. And we had a tough time getting that changed. So.
I have one last question. On my Arkansas year-round grandfather's license, is there any way I can get that transferred to be legal in Arkansas?
Yeah. And,
In Oregon?
in Oregon?
In Oregon?
No.
There's an interesting anomaly that arose out of consideration of those lifetime licenses, and I have an employee that works, well, you maybe knew Mike Harrington, who is a fish biologist. He has a lifetime license in Wyoming. But the interesting thing to me is an Oregon lifetime license, like a pioneer license, is a lifetime resident license. So you still have to be a resident to have that license. So I'm not sure how they ever deal with that in Oregon when they get to that point.
Well,
I'll talk
they
to
don't
him
even
about
have
that.
license in Arkansas, so he's blowing away. He never had a license in Arkansas. He might have been on the renegade side. On the mitigation side of it, I really wish there was a way that, if you do acquire these, that it could be banked, and I'm thinking mitigation for maybe the ODOT side, because we always, and I work well with ODOT, they're always looking for, wetlands or whatever to be able to do some highway projects. So if there's any way in your process that you could bank this, if you purchase it, so that ODOT can leverage that through mitigation to be able to enhance some of these highways or something like that, or any other mitigation process. If you're able to bank it and use it within a sister agency, would be just a great thing, because of, there's always a need. There's always a need. We're sitting here with infrastructure that was built in the 50s and the 40s and the 60s that needs to grow to accommodate the vehicles and everything back now. So if there's any way to bank that, I would really be interested in that. And I'm leaning on the ODOT side of the world, because they're the ones that a lot of times have to mitigate to be able to just put a 4-foot shoulder in. The best example would be going around Klamath Lake over there, where they send a truck into Klamath Lake all the time. Just a thought, you know, that if it could be banked to mitigate for something like that would be great. My 2 cents. I guess I think that might be where you were going.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going.
And we're still working on trying to get broadband internet to some of it.
Okay, that would be good.
It's getting closer.
You ordered on Sherman too?
How are you doing with the negotiations on Hart Mountain for a cell tower for
It's on the table right now. I broach it to him periodically. I'm on CPP.
CPP? You haven't had any discussion since the last meeting? Okay.
But we're waiting on an assessment, feasibility assessment of getting into the one about
They talked
and how important
Yeah, well,
broadband would be to that, and then we'll move it again. It's not, using the federal refuge system is not unheard of. Check through not legal, but wrestling delegation. It has happened across the United States.
we're probably keeping you guys from heading to Hardin County, so.
No, Klamath
Well, my
County
staff in
tomorrow.
Hardin County are staying in Burns. I'm just missing Diamond these days. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank you all actually for taking the time in the afternoon to hearing from us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
Appreciate your
giving us
input.
the update.
Yeah, that goes both ways, because if there is, when these things happen, there can be surprises, and more open and transparent as they all say, the better off we all are. Where I'm at is where I said earlier, is the community and the adjacent landowners are in support of this, and it's beneficial to the community there. It'd be a good thing.
Well, and Chip, your 2 guys, Foz and Marty, we don't ever get to see them because they've always got their nose to the grindstone, so we appreciate what they say.
I know, actually,
A real quick update, tomorrow we'll be appointing the 2 people to the Wolf Depredation Committee. The stock growers' recommendation is John Taylor and Tom O'Leary.
Oh my.
We have 3 applications on the conservation side. We'll narrow that down to 2 tomorrow. So we'll get that appointed, and then I'll set up a meeting. You're obviously involved ad hoc, I guess is what we would call that. And we will start getting that going right away, so.
So, and the latest wolf update, since I've got you guys here, is that we have one colored wolf that's still dinging around Silver Lake area. She's been up on Wind Ridge and Hager and back and forth. She's not causing any problems, she's just around. The wolf that was causing problems in the Williamson River went to California for Christmas. And he has started working his way back north.
Oh, yeah.
So he's about 10 miles, yesterday morning, he was about 10 miles south of the Oregon border.
Is there one just outside of Medford up there where the elk are up by those scales? Is there one there? My son swears he's seen one. We've seen a lot of wildlife out there. That was just last week.
There isn't one there with a collar.
Okay. I said, well, my son's Jeremy, I said, well, Jeremy, I don't know if you had a collar, I could find out, but he's like 99% sure
Well,
he's seen.
You know, we welcome pictures, and with cell phones these days, if folks get a good picture, it gives us some location and something like that.
Well, that makes sense, that's where
I-
they all hang out, is right there.
I had told Foz about it, and I never went to the website yet. I need to remember to get there, but over by Gerhardt, in that neck of the woods, there's a main road going through from Paisley to Bly. And we tried to take a picture, my wife and I, because we kind of know the difference between a coyote and something
Yeah.
much bigger. And it sure felt like a wolf.
Well, with any consolation, I spent 3 field seasons working in southeast Alaska where there were plenty of wolves. I only saw one.
Really?
So they're not exactly
Very rare.
outgoing.
Yeah.
That's what, particularly if they're hunted, they get very, very rare.
I know that Judge Myers in Grant County, he sent me off his cell phone one right up where I helped him up there. The one that walked right across the road in front of him here 2 or 3 years ago. My old cell phone, so I have it no longer, but that's, they've been there way before they stood in Lake County.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Like I said at the cattleman's dinner the other night, we're in the wolf business. Now we gotta get to the point where we're in the wolf management business.
right.
And a summer ago, not this past summer, but previous summer, which is before they all moved in, that was early morning, I was going to Christmas rally on the road. And this coyote crossed right in front of me. The sagebrush was this high, the back of that coyote was that high. We grow some big coyotes around.
Thank you.
So, let me know when they wanna have a meeting, I'll be there.
Yeah, I've just gotta get it going, and Anna's working on, I gave her everything about, we have to get the grant in by the end of February,
Oh, okay.
and so we're going.
Good.
Back on this, my emphasis, key emphasis is all that's been said, but the key one is the next generation, promotion of hunting, fishing for our kids.
We're on it.
And get Ginger a new shotgun so she can.
I can't wait to put my bass boat on there and go bass fishing.
Some of those ponds, your bass boat's gonna be rubbing the bank on the front and back.
153, we're adjourned.
Thanks again.